Hi, everybody. I am making a quick video to help people understand some of the things about tax credits slash student savings accounts slash vouchers that are bad. In Kansas, the House K-12 Budget Committee and the Senate Education Committee passed twin bills out of both of those committees. So they're going to land on the Kansas floor sometime soon. And we need people's capacities to be built up around these issues so that they're ready to reach out to their state legislators when the time comes, which is going to be pretty quick. So this is a very short video explaining why these are actually bad. And I'm going to do it kind of fast, but then I'm going to give you access to the slides that I'm using, and they have tons and tons of links, like dozens of links to the articles that I'm going to be referencing so that you can go back and peruse them at your leisure. And feel free to put things in the comments that you don't understand or need more clarification on, and then we'll just keep building our collective understanding of how these things work, okay? So this is the web URL where you can access this slideshow. I'll come back to it again at the end, but if you want to, you could just remember it. It's bit.ly/voucher advocacy, and this slideshow is there. And then you can also email me at lizmeidel@gmail.com, and I will be happy to answer questions or send you this link or anything like that. So, but I'll come back to this slide again at the end, and I'll put it in the comments of the video. So real quick, I just need to do my due diligence and give a shout out to Public Funds for Public Schools, because a lot of these resources came from them, and they're a national advocacy organization, and they're doing good work all across the nation. And I find them really valuable because they are tracking vouchers all across the country, and so we can use them as a kind of a litmus test to see where we are in the big scheme of things. So the biggest argument that we hear from legislators and from people who are on the other side of the aisle advocating for vouchers is that private schools do a better job of educating students than public schools do. And that's just straight up inaccurate. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of studies at this point that show that private schools do not do better, especially for students who are at risk, than public schools. We know for a fact that kids who move from a public school setting to a private school setting tend to have a drop in their math scores, and they either stay the same or drop in their reading scores. So this idea that private schools are going to automatically improve the outcomes for students, especially at-risk students, is just flat out wrong. So all of the slides that are yellow are discussing that. So this is about what's happened in Louisiana. This is about what's happened in DC, and another one about what's happened in Alabama. All of these studies show that student outcomes are worse in private schools than in public schools. This is one that did a longitudinal study. We've got more from DC. We've got others that go and investigate outcomes across states. And then there's this other one has a lot of stuff about Alabama in it. The reason you're going to hear me talk about Louisiana, Alabama, Indiana, Florida, those are states that passed these same voucher programs, identical in language in most ways to what Kansas is now proposing. And the reason that is because these bills come from ALEC, which is a group of people who push a conservative agenda. And so it's not an accident that the language is exactly the same, because they're written by this group and then pushed out to all the states, and then their little minions in all the state legislatures go and push the bills into each state. And some states are ahead of others in pushing this conservative anti-public school agenda, which is horrible. But what it does for us is it gives us an opportunity to see how these things have impacted other states. And so here's more studies that show that student outcomes are worse in private schools than in public schools. So I've got 2 green slides, and these are about how vouchers and tax credits take money from public schools. This is a good time to say the words vouchers, tax credits, and student savings account are interchangeable. There are conservative legislators who act as if there is a difference in these different words. There is a functional difference in terms of how the money moves, but the money all moves away from the public schools and into the private schools. So if some of it's moving through scholarship granting organizations and others through bank accounts, but it's all moving out away from public schools, and they're all vouchers. There's studies that show that this money moves away from public schools, and the reason, and it sounds really obvious because it is, but somebody had to go in and study it and prove it, because legislators make the point over and over and over that this isn't taking taxpayer money away from public schools. They have all these ways of trying to finesse the language to make it sound like we're not taking money from public schools, but in fact they are. And that's my dog chiming in. Isn't that fun? Okay, and then these orange slides are all going to be about how private school voucher programs lack accountability. And that accountability piece is really important because the public, I'm going to pause just a second. I think she stopped barking. We'll see. So the reason that it's a big deal that voucher programs lack accountability is because public schools are held to very specific standards. And every state has standards for their public schools. Kansas has pretty rigorous standards for our public schools. They're called the KISA standards, and they hold public schools to certain expectations. And every year, the public schools have to work hard to make sure that they're meeting those expectations. When the bills went through the House and Senate committees, there were amendments offered up to try to increase the accountability of private schools in these particular bills. And all of those amendments were voted down. So not only do the private schools not have the same accountability standards as the public schools, but the legislators who tried to put some accountability into the bills were shot down. And so here's a study that shows that 29 states with private school voucher programs don't have the kind of accountability that we would hope for and expect. Here's another one about savings account programs and the poor outcomes of students and how there's no accountability for what happens to those students. Here's another one about how it's created chaos in the DC public school system. Okay, so then now that we're in the red, these slides are about the absence of oversight in private school voucher programs and how that leads to corruption and waste. So this is a hard one for researchers to pin down because following the money is hard. But for instance, in Kansas, the two of the bills, House Bill 2068 and Senate Bill 61, that work through scholarship granting organizations allow the scholarship granting organization to skim 10% of the money that is donated for the tax credit off the top. And so not only is Kansas losing out on the taxes that people would pay, but we're just sending money out of state so that scholarship granting organizations can get rich off of the money that's supposed to be going for kids. It's so bad. So here's an investigation into how that happened in Florida. And then here's one about what happened in Arizona. These blue slides are about what happens with the relationship between vouchers and students with disabilities. As I think most people know, private schools are not required to accept students with disabilities. They often don't have the facilities or the personnel, and which is fine. That's fine that private schools can't serve all children. Public schools are required to serve all children, as we should be. We are federally mandated to serve all children regardless of ability. And we want to, right? but private schools don't have to do that, and they regularly can't and or won't. So when we send money to private schools, we are taking money away from the public schools, who are then required to serve those students who tend to, I mean, they cost more to serve, but we're happy to do it, right? So this is a study about how the implications for students with disabilities and with vouchers. There's another study about what happened to the students who were enrolled in the voucher program who had disabilities, and how their families didn't get good information from the private schools. This is about how students with disabilities end up losing their rights in private schools and voucher programs. This is a study about students with disabilities getting expelled. And so this is another important point. If a student with a disability, or any student, takes voucher money and goes to a private school and then pays their tuition using their voucher money, and then for whatever reason gets expelled and gets sent back to the public school, that money stays with the private school. And so there is a weird incentive for the private schools to accept students that they know they can't serve, and then expel them or ask them to go back to their public schools because it's not working out, which we had people admit in the committee hearing that they do. And then the public school gets them back, but the money stays with the private school. Which is a crazy system. Okay, so these purple slides are all going to be about how private school vouchers don't protect against discrimination. There's a lot of these. There's tons of studies about this. Private schools are allowed to discriminate. And I don't mean that. I like private schools, but they're not mandated to follow the same rules as public schools. I like public schools better. So they don't have to take anybody, right? So they're totally allowed to discriminate based on religion, or on ability status, or on LGBTQ plus status, or on anything. Like a private school could discriminate on height if they wanted, because they're just not subject to the same rules. So here's a study about the dangers voucher programs pose to civil rights. Here's a policy brief about the relationship between federal law and private schools. Here's a working paper from the UC Civil Rights Project about the different legal challenges and civil rights protections and the history of that with voucher programs. Here's another one about how private schools are lagging in diversity. Then there's a whole bunch of studies about how voucher programs actually increase segregation. And these are interesting because you hear legislators talk about how private school voucher programs are supposed to decrease segregation by getting those poor inner city kids into the private schools. But that's not actually how it ever plays out. And there's studies and studies and studies that show that. So here's two of them. Here's another one. Oh, this is an interesting one because this one talks about the history of segregation and how voucher programs started with segregation after Brown versus Board of Education, and how it just continued after that. So that was a brief synopsis of some of the studies that are out there. So what you can do in Kansas, if you wrap your head around all of those issues, then you can go, if you want to, I've linked to the Kansas Legislature YouTube page, and you can go to the House K-12 Budget Committee videos, the Senate Education Committee videos, or the House Education Committee videos, and watch how all of those points that I just raised, the legislators who are proposing these bills try to proactively push back against those points by saying things like, vouchers or tax credits decrease segregation, or Catholic schools take all students with special needs. So they know that these are the weaknesses, and so they try to get their own talking points out there. And because they control the agendas, they typically have more airtime to get their opinions. So we have to watch them and call them out on that. So that's the link where you can do that if you want. So our job now is to urge our legislators to reject any and all bills that are tax credits, student savings accounts, or vouchers. And we need you, every single person in the state of Kansas, even if you're not of voting age, if you're a student, your voice really matters here. So reach out to your House rep and your senator. If you don't know who your House rep and your senator are, there's a link in this slide. That link takes you to Kansas Legislator Lookup, which you can also just Google Kansas Legislator Lookup and find who your House representative and your senator are. You want to reach out to the people who represent you. So the best thing, well, let's start off. Good, email them. That's easy. We can all sit there and send an email quickly saying, please vote against any bill that includes a tax credit, a voucher, or a student savings account. I support public schools and I expect you to support public schools too. That's good. Better call them on the phone, okay? And tell them in person, have a conversation with them. Tell them that you're their constituent. Talk to them about how much public schools mean to you. Talk to them about how much you value the high quality public schools in the state of Kansas. And best option is to call your legislator and get 5 people that you know who also care about public schools to also call their legislators. The most powerful phone calls are going to come from people who have never reached out before, but all of our voices matter. So that's that. I'll drop the links in the comments, and thanks for watching this far. And I hope you all have a great day and call your legislators. Thanks. Bye.